Everybody knows Lewis Hamilton, but do you really know how good he really is at motorsports? Holding the record of winning the most races in Formula One history, he must be one of the absolute greatest ever. But is he the GOAT though? Holding not just records and titles, but the best underdog story as well, as the start of his career was not promising at all for Lewis Hamilton.
What do you gonna do in the future?
Hopefully race Formula 1.
But he made sure to turn that around with his Kobe-like winner mentality.
Lately, if anybody had said anything to me, I would just ignore them.
I was just 8 years old. For someone to look down at a young 8-year-old and tell them they're not going to achieve anything in life.
Formula One might be the most difficult sport to get into. There are very limited spots in the sport, and karting is extremely expensive. Most drivers come from a wealthy background, with parents who are able to afford to put them through karting from a very young age. Lewis did not come from a wealthy family, and so he actually began in racing with radio-controlled cars from a very young age. He finished second in the BRCA championship despite the fact he was facing adult competition. Hamilton's father bought him a go-kart when he was just 6 years old. But karting was something that the Hamilton family could barely afford, and his father, Anthony, had to take multiple jobs just to be able to put his son into karting. Lewis began karting when he was just 8 years old, and became the youngest driver ever to win the British Cadet Karting Championship 2 years later. Despite having a brilliant young karting career, a young Lewis Hamilton found plenty of challenges. He often faced racist abuse at races, even as a child. Motorsport doesn't have a lot of black drivers, and so Lewis Hamilton faced plenty of doubters. He was able to rise up through the ranks despite those doubters. He continued into Formula racing in his teenage years.
It's absolutely superb. He's picked his moment brilliantly.
And it was at 10 years old that a young Lewis met one of the most influential people in his life, McLaren team boss Ron Dennis. Lewis told the McLaren boss that he would drive for his famous team one day. Dennis kept an eye on a young Lewis Hamilton as he had more and more success in junior racing. Lewis won the Super 1 Series twice and won multiple British championships. It was during this time that Hamilton was signed for the McLaren Driver Development Program. His success also brought him closer to a future Formula One teammate. Lewis first met Nico Rosberg in 2000 when the two were teammates. Lewis would be considered a superstar in the making and destined for a place in Formula One. His time in Formula racing only helped to ramp up those expectations. Lewis won the Formula Renault 2.0 series in 2003, beating future F1 driver Paul di Resta on the way to the title. 2 years later, he dominated the Formula 3 Euro Series, winning 15 of the 20 races on his way to the title. By 2006, Lewis finally got the promotion to GP2 that his father had been desperate to see, and the 21-year-old performed brilliantly. In a field featuring future F1 drivers Nelson Piquet Jr., Vitaly Petrov, and Timo Glock, Lewis dominated on his way to the title. He won both races at Silverstone, being able to hold off a late charge by Piquet to win the GP2 championship. The talent the kid had was obvious, and it wasn't long before he got the opportunity he was always looking for. That relationship with Ron Dennis led Hamilton to be one of the favorites for the vacant McLaren seat heading into 2007. There was hot competition to be Fernando Alonso's teammate, but Dennis put his faith in Lewis Hamilton. Expectations weren't massively high for Lewis, seeing as he was going to be alongside a back-to-back world champion.
He wanted to win the Constructors, meaning that he didn't feel that Lewis was going to be much of a threat.
On debut, Lewis briefly fought for the lead of the race and eventually finished in third. People forget now, but Lewis started off his career with an insane run of 9 podiums in a row. That run of podiums included the Canadian Grand Prix, where Lewis secured pole position and his first race win. He showed incredible experience to get the best out of a hectic race and win the first of his 103 race victories. A week later, Lewis won in the USA to put himself 10 points clear at the top of the driver's standings. Despite winning 2 more races, Lewis found himself 1 point short in the championship race. That was thanks in part to Lewis making a rare mistake in the penultimate race of the year, putting himself in the gravel trap on the way to the pits in China. Thankfully, 2008 made plenty of people forget about the mistake that cost Lewis a title. Throughout the season, Lewis was engulfed in a brilliant back-and-forth title race with Ferrari driver Felipe Massa. The season included a home Grand Prix win, where Lewis won by over a minute. Heading into the final race of the season, it looked like Lewis could miss out on another title. He could only manage 4th in qualifying and fell to 6th in the race. With Massa in first, the the Brazilian crossed the finish line thinking he had won the title, but Lewis had pitted for wet tires.
Is that Glock? Is that Glock going slowly?
It is, it's Glock! Oh my goodness me! Hamilton's back in position again!
In the final few corners, Glock was going slowly, and Lewis managed to pass him, giving him 5th place and enough points to win the title by just 1. It created one of the most dramatic moments in Formula One history and was the youngest Formula One world champion in the history of the sport. From this point, Lewis looked destined to break countless records, but things did not always work out perfectly for a young Lewis Hamilton. The years following that title win brought more race wins for Lewis, but not as many titles as people expected. McLaren took a big step back in 2009 as they failed to match the engineering genius of Brawn. The following season, Lewis went into the final race of the year with a chance at victory, but finished 4th and had to watch as Sebastian Vettel won his first world championship. Lewis picked up 3 more race wins in 2011, but still failed to capture that elusive second title. For much of 2012, Lewis was in the title picture. In one of the most intriguing title races in years, the McLaren driver took the lead of the championship in Canada after another race win in Montreal.
What a great feeling. I loved every single minute of it.
The issue for Lewis was that reliability problems kept on getting in his way. While his pace was really good, he did not have a consistent car underneath him. The 2012 Singapore Grand Prix was a massive turning point in Hamilton's career. While leading the race, his McLaren had a gearbox failure, which caused Lewis to retire. He watched his title hopes slip once again, and it caused a big change. The relationship between Lewis and McLaren was crumbling, and he began looking for a way out. Before the end of the season, Lewis announced he would be heading to Mercedes. Many fans and pundits saw the move as a massive risk. Lewis had been with McLaren since he was a child, and he was going to a team that had not won an F1 world title in decades. Lewis would be partnering with his childhood karting teammate, Nico Rosberg, and the pair had success together.
Stand as one for Lewis Hamilton.
I was coming to the last lap and I could see the crowd beginning to stand up.
Lewis won just a single race in 2013 as Red Bull, and Sebastian Vettel ran away with the title. But 2014 brought brand new engine regulations that allowed Mercedes and Hamilton to get on top. No one knew that in the turbo hybrid era of Formula One engines, Mercedes would be the dominant force. That domination began in 2014, with Mercedes winning 16 of the 19 races that year.
It's been one of the most difficult and treacherous Grand Prix in the history of Formula One racing. That was the drive of a champion. Lewis Hamilton wins the Japanese Grand Prix.
Lewis himself won 11 of those, enough to hold off title challenger Rosberg for the title. The following season saw Hamilton's friendship with Rosberg turn into an intense and heated rivalry. Lewis won back-to-back titles thanks to a wheel-to-wheel victory over Rosberg at the United States Grand Prix.
Beginning to stand up, and I was just praying, keep it on the track, just finish.
He created a very unhappy Nico Rosberg in that race, and it led to one of the most intense post-race encounters, with Rosberg throwing the second-place hat at Lewis and refusing to take part in the podium ceremony tradition of spraying champagne. 2016 saw that frustration boil over onto the track. The Spanish Grand Prix saw Lewis claim pole position just ahead of his teammate. But as the two battled through the first sector, the Mercedes made contact after Rosberg forced his teammate onto the grass. Lewis and his car collected Nico on the way through. Both Mercedes were taken out at the first turn. That same season, the pair once again collided in Austria.
Perhaps it was his corner, but he made a mistake and crashed into me, so...
This time, Rosberg went straight on as the two were battling and caused damage to his own car while allowing Lewis through to win.
I don't know I guess I'm definitely not at fault there.
Despite being blamed for those crashes, Rosberg still came home to beat the Englishman and win the championship.
Family, to my team, Mercedes have been incredible for the last 5 years, and I'm so proud to be a part of it.
Rosberg retired just a few days after the championship finale.
I've decided to end my Formula One career.
And all of a sudden, Lewis had the front of the grid all to himself once again.
I left a lot of room. I didn't try to close him in or anything like that. I went to the right.
With Rosberg retiring, a different rival began to get close to Lewis in 4-time world champion Sebastian Vettel.
Anyways, I'm on the inside, and it's my position, and I have the corner, and I have the right to.
Ferrari produced a championship contending car, and it gave Lewis some challenging title battles with Vettel, but in back-to-back seasons, he and his Mercedes team were just able to stretch away from the competition in the back half of the season. 2018 might have started out as a close title race between Lewis and Seb.
Hamilton, and Hamilton is coming back at him, and he's got a great toe. Oh, and he wanted to go down the inside.
But it finished with Hamilton setting the record for the most points scored in a season with 408. Lewis won again in 2019, breaking the record for the most points just a season after setting the record himself. 2020 might have been the first time in a long time that Lewis missed a race, thanks to contracting COVID-19. But it didn't stop the Brit from winning his record-equaling 7th world title. Lewis had a spell of dominance in Formula One that we haven't ever seen before, and it helped him rack up 7 world titles.
7th British Grand Prix victory! Lewis Hamilton, 7-time champion of the world!
Lewis was just on a different level to every other driver on the grid. People look back and seem to mainly remember how good the Mercedes car was. It's true that no team was able to take advantage of the engine changes in 2014, as Mercedes were. Every team was looking to copy their design season after season, but it took meticulous training and the focus to make no mistakes that allowed Lewis to dominate the sport. He was the best qualifier and racer through this stretch, being able to overcome adversity with ease. There was no one able to stop him during this period, except for his own teammate, Nico Rosberg. It seemed like a certainty that Lewis would claim his record-breaking 8th world title in 2021, but he had to contend with up-and-coming Max Verstappen. The young Red Bull driver took a big lead in the championship mid-season, as he was able to get the better of Lewis when they faced each other on track. Their battle continued into the British Grand Prix, where Lewis and Max battled intensely through the first lap of the race. As they reached the back straight, the pair collided, sending Max flying into the tire wall and out of the race.
Racing incidents.
I wonder what the stewards will think about
Could Hamilton have done anything to give Max Verstappen room there and avoid that crash? He was on the inside, of course.
Despite picking up a penalty for the accident, Lewis was still able to come home for the win.
He chases the checkered flag. He wins the British Grand Prix for an 8th time.
It helped him start a comeback that saw the pair of them enter the final race of the season level on points. Lewis was the faster man throughout the weekend, and he led most of the race despite starting in 2nd place behind the Dutchman. Max and Red Bull couldn't do much about it, as Lewis looked certain to come to the checkered flag as champion. But a crash with 5 laps to go brought out the safety car and bunched the grid back up together. Max had the fresher tires, but also had multiple cars in between him and Lewis that did not have enough time to pass the safety car. Or so that is what was thought. The race became one of the most controversial in the sport's history due to the decision race director Michael Masi made in letting just the cars between Lewis and Max pass the safety car. All of a sudden, there was 1 lap left, and Max had the much fresher tires. Lewis couldn't hold off the Dutchman, and despite various protests from Mercedes, the result stood. The race resulted in Masi losing his job, and many fans believed that Lewis would retire after suffering an incredible injustice. But after going silent on social media, Lewis decided to return for 2022 onwards. Sadly for Lewis and Mercedes, they have failed to produce a title charge in the years following 2021. In 2022, the Mercedes car featured the Brave Zero sidepod design that caused the car to porpoise horribly on the straights. It was the first time that he failed to win a race in a single season throughout his entire Formula One career. Lewis dropped well off the pace, and Mercedes have failed to bridge that gap in recent years. While they fixed some of the issues that caused Lewis so many troubles, he was still unable to get back into the title race. Lewis finished 3rd in the championship, adding 6 podiums, but once again failing to find the race win he was looking for. This season has seen Lewis announce a shocking move. He will be completing a childhood dream by driving for Ferrari in 2025. The 7-time world champion clearly feels like Mercedes can't provide him the championship-contending car that he is looking for as Lewis gets towards the end of his career. It is certainly a decision that few people saw coming, and should give Lewis the chance to win that elusive 8th world title that he is looking for. But even if the 39-year-old fails to break Michael Schumacher's record of world titles, his legacy in the sport of Formula One is very secure. People have varying opinions, but it is hard to deny the fact that Lewis Hamilton is the greatest Formula One driver of all time. He has the most wins and most pole positions out of every single Formula One driver in the sport's history. He is the first man to reach 100 race wins, and is by far the leader in points and podium finishes in F1 history. That is one hell of a legacy to leave behind for a kid who grew up dreaming of even getting into Formula One.